Welcome to the Celtic Huddle podcast. I'm Mark Wilson. I'm joined today by the Celtic legend Murdo Macleod. Today we'll be joined live by the Celtic Trust chairman David Lowe. His views on Celtic are not to be missed, so hang around for that. Later in the programme we'll also have exclusive news concerning the future of Celtic wonder kid Karamoko Dembele, so don't miss that also. We'll also be joined once again by Derek McGregor from the Scottish Sun and John McGarry from the Scottish Daily Mail. Both journalists have followed Celtic's season closely and they'll give us their inside view. Derek and John will review the media coverage and what the pundits and former players have been saying over the past week. Also, to anyone watching, listening, get your comments and questions to Murdo and David. As usual, we'll read out as many as we can. And we want to hear from you, the Celtic fans. It's a great one today with David being on. We want to hear your voice, so get your questions in and we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can. And I'm delighted to say once again the podcast is now sponsored by First Star Legends Gin, First Class Transfers and Social Recluse. We thank them all for their support once again. So let's get to it. No time to waste, but first and foremost, I think it's only fitting we mentioned the sad passing of Shuggie Edvalson this week, aged 70, a Celtic hero, made 180 appearances. Murdo, in your time at the club between 75 and 80, also played his part in that famous league triumph 4-2-1 at Rangers that you scored a tap in, I rightly remember, Jay. But sad news this week, Murdo.
Yeah, very sad. It's funny, Shuggie was one of these players never got in touch with after you kind of stopped playing, because over the years I remember going to Celtic, and or even before going to Celtic, Shuggie Edvalson was he was a character, a big frame man, a bruiser, a batterer in challenges and all that kind of thing. Shuggie, and he could play, he could pass and all that kind of thing. Good speed about him as well. Good in the air. Everything that was great about him. Playing at centre back, and then when you meet up with Shuggie, it was just great. Chatting all the time, and he's always going on about how good he was. It was like Beckenbauer at the back, and it was great. And funny, it was Shuggie that I ended up with the nickname Rhino, and it was Shuggie Edvalson that came up with it. He was at one side of Celtic Park. We were having a training session on the pitch, and he was down at the Celtic end and playing away with the defenders, and we were up the other end, and we've got all the balls along the 18-yard line and round the curve. Mm-hmm. And the balls are there, and there's a pole, and you had to go and run one way, kick the ball with your right foot, round the pole again, kick it with your left foot, and I'm battering away, and all this kind of thing. And I'm hearing all the boys at the bottom end laughing away, and Shuggie had said, "Look at Murdo, he's like a rhino there. Look at him, he's charging, he's charging round there and all that." And that's how it all started, was Shuggie on the pitch. It just said, you're charging him and battering the ball, both feet and all that kind of thing. And that's how the Rhino started then. The Rhino,
well, there you go, an exclusive on the Celtic Huddle podcast. But condolences to Shuggie's family, and a sad loss this week. So thoughts are with them at this time. So let's, moving on just now, let's chat about Murdo. You've not been on the show for a couple of weeks, so
was that a suspension or something?
We thought we'd give you a wee rest. It's been a long Christmas period for you. But look, what's your thoughts on what's been happening at the club in those past few weeks? Obviously, come back from Dubai, couple of games, 3 games in there, Hibs and a couple against Livingston. Thoughts on how the last week to 10 days has went?
Oh, it's been horrendous, absolutely horrendous. You're sitting back, and I'm always looking at the players, and you're thinking, well, they're going to come back and lift the whole thing, because especially the Dubai thing, and never mind about the background to the Dubai thing. When you're away and you've had the training sessions, and you've got a bit of colour about you, you're feeling great, you're desperate to get back onto the football pitch, and that everyone felt that was going to happen, because last year Rangers went to Dubai and they came back and hardly won a game. Celtic went to Dubai and came back and went on a fantastic run. And that everybody was expecting that. And never mind what's going on off the pitch. But the football team should been good enough to get points or win games against Livingston twice and the Hibs game. And it
seems a bit lost just now. Do you know? I think the club, from from different statements here, there and everywhere. Assistant managers, coaches, managers, chief execs, all kind of, not singing off the same hymn sheet. Is there a lack of leadership at the club?
Well, you're looking at every part of the club just now, right at the very top. You're looking, Peter came out and apologised, and then the manager comes out a few days later and saying, no, should be doing this and doing that and all the different things. And on the pitch, there's no leaders on the pitch. You're looking at some of the guys 6'6", and you're thinking these boys will lift the whole team through. They'll defend well. It's not happened. They'll score goals at the other end. It's not happened. All these kind of things, and every unit at Celtic Park just now is not functioning well enough. And that's the reason. You look across the city and everything's going fine, and you're scared to look across the city because Rangers just keep on getting better and better. Even when they're not playing well, they're still getting 3 points all the time. When we don't play well, we never get 3 points.
Just now.
We get punished all the time.
And that's sadly how the season is going. But listen, we've got a great guest coming up. The last couple of weeks, and since we've started, we've had ex-players on, pundits, media guys giving their opinion and what's really went wrong this season at Celtic. But we've got a good one here. David Lowe, we'll bring David in now. David, Chairman of the Celtic Trust, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Hope you're well.
Yeah, well, and glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. David, just to get right into it, so you can let us know a wee bit more what the Celtic Trust is, but tell us what it's all about and your involvement in it, if you can.
Well, I've been involved in the Celtic Trust for a year now. Feels like forever. And of course, a year ago, the coronavirus wasn't an issue. The reason why I got involved is because I and others were becoming increasingly concerned about the number of lost shareholders in Celtic. Now you might say, well, big deal, but it's ultimately shareholders that own the club. And over the last 25 years, and I was involved in sort of setting this structure up with Fergus and others, over the years, shareholders have died, shareholders have relocated, shareholders have basically become detached from their shares. And that in turn means, they can't vote on key matters. So the amount of lost shares is sort of very large at Celtic because it's probably the only share that a lot of these people own because they bought it for emotional reasons rather than financial reasons. And it's also important because it consolidates power in the hands of the few. If you're a 30% shareholder or a 40% shareholder, that's a percentage of the whole lot. But if 20% is missing, minority interest becomes a controlling interest. So I and others sort of thought that was very unhealthy, and I got involved to do something about that. And over the course of the last year, we've been reuniting Celtic supporters, Celtic shareholders with their shares. And, we have worked with Celtic, the club, the PLC, if you like, to achieve that. And, we'll be putting out a frequently asked question list probably next week. But of course, that's maybe not what you expected me to say, because all that work's been superseded by the collapse in the team and the disappearance of 10 in a row, or the near disappearance. Technically, it's still possible, but it's very unlikely. That's why I got involved. But the role is sort of changed because of what's happened with the club, the team.
Yeah. Well, firstly, just on that, just out of interest, personal interest. I mean, how is that going? How does that kind of work where you're trying to find lost shares, and has it been successful so far in this year?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of shareholders have been reunited. So what happens is the two most common reasons why a shareholder becomes detached is because the person dies, and remember, just 25 years have passed, or the person flits, changes address, and fails to notify the club. So what we are doing is broadcasting that problem and highlighting how you fix it. It's quite easy to fix. You basically get in touch with the Celtic registrars. That is an independent company that maintains the share register for Celtic. And there's basically a process and a procedure to be followed. But once you're in contact with the registrars, you can get reunited with your shares. When somebody's died, it's a little bit more complicated because you've got an executory involved and you've got to prove that you are entitled to those shares that your relation previously had. But as I said, the number is very large, in excess of 10%. And when it comes to key issues about the future of Celtic, shares that help decide the future. So the Celtic Trust is reuniting fans with shares. We're also an umbrella group. Together, a whole lot of small shareholders together are a lot more powerful and influential, or potentially influential, than they are as a disparate bunch of shareholders with an uncoordinated view of things. So we're sort of an umbrella group. Of course, the poor performance of the teams resulted in a huge increase in our membership.
Yeah, we may go into that in a few questions' time, but let me just touch on, you mentioned something earlier, the Celtic Trust. I mean, they've been vocal on many issues, but in an organised and controlled and respectful manner. I think that's what really grabbed the headlines of the media in comparison to the protests of the week before. I mean, how challenging was that to put together? Where we've seen the protests at Celtic Park.
You guys know that when it comes to Celtic, everybody has an opinion, everybody could do it better, and everybody tells you you're doing it wrong. So it's a very volatile situation being involved with Celtic in any capacity, whether it's football management, football playing, or even one of the sort of satellite groups like the Celtic Trust. And we have had 2 public forums, with 300 people on them. It's like a giant celebrity squares, and everybody's got an opinion. And this collapse in the team, and it is a collapse. It's not off form; it's a collapse. Has caught everybody on the hop. Everybody's got exaggerated feelings. Everybody's in a sort of state of near shock, and everybody's looking for somebody to blame. So, we amidst all of that, we are a constituted body with protocols, rules, regulations, responsibilities, and we've tried to hold that line throughout all of this. And that even so on you go.
I was just going to say, Dave, are you recognised by Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell?
Well, Dermot Desmond is a non-executive director. He's a big shareholder, controlling shareholder, if you like, but he's not on site, so to speak. So the trust is we can't unrecognise you. We do exist. We are a shareholder supporters organisation, and we do have regular meetings with the club about a variety of issues, and have done over the years. But this is a big one. The membership's never been higher. The feelings have never been stronger. And we have a big meeting tonight, and they'll all be asking, what are you going to say about this? So I'm expecting a pretty rumbustious meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the trust appears
to be... So they do recognise the answer to your question.
And I mean, my next question was, have you had any meaningful dialogue with the hierarchy at the club? But you just, you've touched on that there and answered that, and you'll be hoping after today's meeting or tonight's meeting that then continues. You've got a platform to take that to the club and speak face to face with them, have you?
Yeah, I'm expecting tonight that the members in a member meeting, will give the committee, if you want to call it that, the mandate to go to Celtic with what is decided. So what is decided will be decided tonight by the members. It is one man, one vote. It is very democratic. It's not what I think or the other committees think. It's what the members vote. And everybody has a vote, whether you subscribe £10 a month or £1,000 a month. It's one man and woman, obviously, vote. So we'll find out the mood of the meeting tonight and what we're instructed to do when we speak to and meet with Celtic, pretty soon.
Yeah. Just we've asked people to get their comments in. Paul McKenzie, the first one. Silence from Celtic really concerning. The fans deserve better, and I suppose that's what the trust is about. Voicing the fans' concern. I mean, the trust appears to be focusing on what's happening at boardroom level. I guess, what changes would you like to see to benefit the club, David?
Well, basically, we have got a lot of feedback, but the decisions will be made tonight. But at the end of the day, replacing the manager if the system's wrong is not going to make much difference. You know, it's the directors that are responsible for managing and leading the company. It's the directors of the PLC that lead and set the policy, set the tone, set the budget, give the manager of the day the parameters that he's going to work with. So if it's the view of the members that something has gone wrong, you know, where does that buck stop? It doesn't stop with the manager. It stops with the people. It stops with the people in charge. Nobody can abrogate responsibility or run away from this. You know, leaving the manager to take the flak, in my personal opinion, is just not good enough. I think there's systemic problems in that club. There's a lot of directors been there forever, well, not forever and a day, for over 9 years, which is not in tandem with good corporate governance. I think the whole institution is a bit stale and needs a shake-up, and I think that shake-up starts at the top. Just trying to put this on the manager, is, in my opinion, is not right. I don't think too many managers... On you go.
Yeah, when you say the top, then, and I understand what you're getting at, but are you meaning, you know, in Dermot Desmond, the club's got a billionaire who most clubs don't have, but are you talking about from the top, from him, or underneath him? You know, I read your piece on Nick Train, and people involved in the club like that. Is that who you mean? Who needs? Yeah, that needs changed.
The directors are appointed by the shareholders. The biggest shareholder is Dermot Desmond. The whole sport's in a horrible position now with the virus, and having a billionaire in your corner is a good thing. Let's be clear about that. And Dermot Desmond's been around with Celtic since 1994, and he's done little that can be quite frankly criticised. But at the end of the day, it's the shareholders, of which he's the biggest, that appoints the board. It's the board of the PLC that is responsible for the running of the club and everything to do with that. That's who's got responsibility for where we are. They appoint the manager. They appoint heads of departments, directors of football. That's where the buck stops. If it's deemed to be that Celtic's doing badly, which it is, that's where the buck stops, not with the manager. It ends up with the manager. The buck ends up with the manager. But it starts with the directors, who are appointed by the shareholders, and Dermot's the biggest shareholder, and he has the biggest influence. So nothing controversial, nothing to be challenged here. These are all statements of fact and apply to all companies, of which Celtic is.
Okay, and I mean, what are the ongoing goals then for the trust? And ultimately, then, is there an end game to this? Do you get to a point where you're satisfied? Is it a member of the trust on the board, a fans on the board thing that I've heard and read about various other clubs? Would that work?
Yeah, well, the Celtic Trust has a constitution, and enshrined in that constitution is an aspiration. The aspiration of the Celtic Trust is to own Celtic Football Club, which practically means owns the PLC. So before it can own the PLC, it has to have its hands on. There's a little matter of where do you find 150 million from, and then on top of that, you know, the people that own the shares in the club have to consent to sell it. So practically at this moment in time, it's an aspiration rather than a reality. But what we've also done is increased membership. We have increased the shareholding that the trust owns. The membership is largely made up of shareholders, and you don't even have to be a member of the trust to agree with the aspirations of the trust. So the trust is sort of picking up a whole lot of small shareholder support. But to answer your question, the aspirations to own the club, practically, you know, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's much more easy to take over a smaller club, you know, like Motherwell or even Morton, or even Hearts for that matter. But something as large as Celtic with 28,000 shareholders, it's not quite as easy as some people may think it is, because we don't have a willing seller, and you've got to find 150 million to take it over.
Yeah, Murdo, you got that in your
Meantime, we have to focus on the issues of the day. Go Haffers,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, on you go, David. The issues of the day, as in,
well,
you know.
Yeah, well, historically, the trust's been involved, which predates my involvement, with a number of campaigning issues. You know, they were involved with the Dam Boys when Celtic fans in Amsterdam were assaulted, and the Celtic Trust played a leading part sorting that out, and played a leading part in the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act, getting it repealed. So historically it's got a very strong and successful campaign of campaigning. But now, you know, it's not surrendering that, but now we're sort of focusing on ownership and influence, and because there are concerns amongst their membership that the whole Celtic situation is a bit stale, a bit fat, and a bit lazy, and could do with a shake-up.
David, what was it like going back maybe a year? Are you the same mindset you've got just now, going back a year when Celtic were winning everything in Scottish football? Is it the same mentality that you were thinking about, taking over, helping, getting all the shareholders together again, and whereas everything in the garden was all rosy a year ago, now all of a sudden it's the exact opposite. So what was your thoughts going back a year?
I would say there was quite a lot of fans thought there had been a sort of a deterioration in the team, but you know, these things happen. What there was, though, I think there was almost an assumption that we just had to turn up to win 10. That's me personally speaking now. You know, we had more money than the opposition, we had more players, bigger squad, more internationalists. You know, we could throw it away, but the mindset was, you know, just turn up and we'll win this. I really do believe that to be the case. When I got involved a year ago, it wasn't to be involved in any of the stuff that we're talking about just now. That's me answering your question, Murdo. No. The concern was that control of Celtic was vested in two individuals, basically, Dermot and a guy in the city called Nick Train, who runs an investment firm called Lindsell Train. And with all the corporate activity in football clubs across the globe, I and others, you know, didn't want to wake up one morning and find that it's basically Celtic had changed hands before we had a chance to try and stop it or influence it. So the second largest shareholder has no emotional investment in Celtic. He's basically playing a game whereby if Celtic gets into a better league or a better jurisdiction and gets its hands on all the TV money, you know, 200 million plus, certainly the value of his investment, you know, would go up fivefold. That's why the investment Nick Train guy in the city is involved in Celtic. So that's not healthy to have a football club controlled by somebody like that. I'm not questioning Dermot Desmond's motivations. Let's be clear about that. But I'm questioning the motivations of the second largest shareholder. So I and others thought that was bad, and I and others thought that if we could consolidate small shareholders, reactivate dead shares, etc., you know, that would help mitigate risk. And that's still a primary objective, but it's sort of been overtaken by events. It's been overtaken by the collapse of the team, which is, you know, why you've got me on this program, basically.
Yeah, listen, David, just before we let you go, I mean, you were heavily involved in the movement and change in the early 90s when Fergus McCann obviously took over. Are there any similarities at the minute, just now, that you see at the club to that time where you were heavily involved?
Yeah, I think there are some similarities. It's not an exact correlation. Celtic in the early 90s was broke, you know, and miles behind Rangers, didn't have a stadium, didn't have a good board, didn't have any money, and you know, it took 2 years to sort that out. Of course, over 5 years, you know, Fergus and the board he worked with, including Dermot Desmond, I might add, you know, put Celtic into a position whereby they're the biggest, wealthiest, etc., if not the best at the moment on the park. The similarities with just now, I think, are a complacent, detached ivory tower board of directors. There's 5 non-executive directors, 4 of which have been there for more than 9 years. That's not good. There's a thing when you're a PLC called the Nominations Committee, which is supposed to meet every year, a couple of times at least, and decide what's the best complexion of the board. Well, they didn't meet at all last year, and it sort of corroborates the suggestion, you know, that they're all pretty comfortable in their positions and take it easy. I think everything around Celtic was a wee bit sort of lazy in terms of entitlement. It's just my personal opinion, and I think this has come as a shock. This has come as a shock to everybody. This has come as a shock to the directors. Let's be clear about that, as well as the manager, the players, and the fans. And there's lots of reasons for it. We've not touched upon the fact that, you know, half the team appears to want away. that's very relevant. If you had a league table of reasons why, that'd be pretty near the top of my list.
Yeah. Well, listen, David, some interesting points there. Lots for people to think about. People who will be watching or listening in throughout the week. Thank you for joining us, and we wish you well. We know you've got the meeting tonight, so we'll listen out intently to see what comes of that. But thanks very much, David, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Yep, thanks for having me on. Goodbye.
Cheers, David. Good to see you again.
Yeah, look, I mean, a man that knows a lot about the structure of the club, much more than I would. Maybe yourself, but he was there in the early 90s, Murdo. Aye. He mentioned himself there that he set up this whole process where the board find themselves on, and it's an interesting point where he's not really having a go at Dermot Desmond. I think it's underneath Nick Train, the second largest shareholder, and it's an interesting point to make.
Well, when you're involved,
he's not emotionally connected. Nick Train.
When you're involved with a lot of people who's got shares, small amount of shares, and then you're pulling them all together, and then there's somebody else with so many shares that's kind of going to be able to control the place. So that's when you want to give all your people
a voice and a voice that really matters, I suppose.
Really matters, other than just because Dermot Desmond's been great for Celtic. He's always been there, but he's always been at the side. Yeah. Whereas when you've got someone else want to run it their way and no other way, then
the number of trusts now are increasing throughout the country and throughout Britain. I suppose the supporters are getting involved in either managing to take over a club, and David mentioned it there, St Mirren and Motherwell might be much easier, but it's gaining popularity, and it'll be interesting to see if anything comes with it, especially when he says he does have a direct link or direct dialogue with Peter Lawwell in the hierarchy.
It's funny, David was around that. I remember right back at the 90s, he was always there, and when Fergus McCann was about, he was always there. He was always the kind of helper to Fergus McCann all the time, and he's always been about the club, so he knows exactly who's
got the club at heart,
who's all at different levels, and
knows
everything about it, and he's been very good for Celtic over all the years.
Certainly is. Interesting point, good way to start the show. So let's move on. So just before we bring in Derek McGregor and John McGarry, we promised you exclusive news about Karamoko Dembele. Dembele turns 18 next month. He's out of contract in the summer. It's been well documented that Celtic were disappointed that he's not decided to renew that contract, if he's even been offered one. We're not quite sure. But the Celtic Huddle's information is that Dembele is set to leave Murdo in the summer and will move abroad. With a number of clubs interested, including French sides Lille and Nantes. I think I read when was that, back in December as well, that Borussia Dortmund, Euro Club were interested as well. So let's just bring in John and Derek now. Guys, how yous doing?
Good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon, Murdo.
Hi, guys.
Guys, we were just... we had an interesting conversation there with David Lowe, but let's just start with the point that we were just on there about Karamoko Dembele and his situation. What's happened to the lad, John? What do you think has happened here with Karamoko Dembele?
I think it's a classic case of a team this season that's been struggling, and the last thing you can then do is turn to a young player. But if you remember, it was the final game, I think 2 seasons ago, where he got his first start against Hearts. It was. Yeah, and he really lit the place up. He was a real kind of name on everyone's lips at that point in time. And I suppose what's happened since then is that Celtic really have been unable to put their trust in youth, or have been unwilling to do so, because the first thing when you're under pressure is that you can stand with your sort of more trusted figures, and he's been kind of squeezed out the picture, and there hasn't been the scope for him to get game time. But there's plenty of clubs where you would certainly be in on talent alone. He's not helped by the fact that he's trying to get a game in probably the most competitive area of the field, of course. It does seem like he's going to go, and there's no doubt that people will question as to why he's not been given more of a crack at it.
Yeah, but Derek, I mean, I read reports again, and we don't know how true these are, so you might be the man to clear this up. Reports how the Celtic coaching staff were less than pleased with his development, his physical development. I even read that it could be down to his attitude. Now, I must say that I don't know that. I don't know Karamoko Dembele, or I've not heard that, but that's what I read. Do you hear similar things, or what's your opinion and what's happened to him?
I mean, I couldn't 100% verify that, Mark. I don't know the lad personally. It would be unfair of me to kind of unjustly besmirch his character. But yes, I have heard, similar suggestions. There is a phrase that there's no smoke without fire. I think when he burst onto the scene, I think when he was 13 when he played for the Celtic development side, the under-20 development side at Capello a number of years ago when Brendan Rodgers was still in charge. I begin to wonder if that actually didn't help him. If that was possibly maybe the worst thing that could have happened to him, because at that point I think it was possibly unrealistic expectations for him. Clearly a naturally gifted player. But for various reasons, it's just not happened. Now, clearly Neil Lennon and John Kennedy have felt that for whatever reason he's not doing enough to merit a better chance. Certainly, we recall the recent game against Livingston at Celtic Park, when you've got a scenario where you've got Tom Rogic playing up front. And I think everyone felt then at that point it was almost an indictment on the Celtic Academy that there wasn't actually an actual striker available at such a time. And Dembele probably, more than most, would have probably felt disappointed he didn't get a start in that game, given the complete lack of an out-and-out striker.
I mean, we need to remember he is still 17. He turns 18 next month, and I was looking into previous eras where young boys have came through. You look at comparisons with the hype, McGeady, Maloney. I think these guys were 17, 18 as well before they really established themselves. So, I mean, maybe it's a year down the line you'd see a better player. But as a contract, John, do you think a contract's, well, firstly, on offer for him, and secondly, will he sign it?
I think he has been offered a contract, but it's been on the table for some time. You have to bear in mind, when he signed his first contract, how difficult it was for Celtic to get him to commit to that, because there were all manner of clubs trying to get him to move there at that point in time. So it was a bit of a coup when Celtic got that. I suppose his family and Karamoko could turn and say, well, we've not really had an opportunity here. We don't see that word pathway to the first team. It really has been a kind of handful of opportunities. I think what Derek says here is spot on. There have been a couple of games recently when, to be perfectly honest with you, the pressure's kind of off because everyone accepts the league's gone, and you could, and obviously after Dubai, there were a number of players missing. You could have given them a run out that day, and you look between the lines on such occasions, and you think, well, if not now, then when's it going to be? And it doesn't seem as if it's going to happen for him. And perhaps that's just led his family to conclude that if he is going to make it at the top level in football, that he's got to get out of there and get a change of scenery.
Yeah, somebody, Stephen Jordan here has just tweeted in here, Karamoko is going down the Ryan Gold route. Now, I was at Dundee United with Ryan Gold. He went away. He got a big move. Football wilderness for a bit, but he seems to be rebuilding his career. One above it, Sean Maher. I mean, saying no big loss. He will be another Islam Feruz. Again, Islam Feruz. I was at the club with Islam Feruz. He looked a star, but I suppose.
But when you're a young player,
club in Europe,
I think over the years when he first came on the scene, Dembele, everybody was talking about him and all this kind of thing. For me personally, I don't think he played enough games to become the superstar that. He will become a superstar at some point if he goes. He's going to leave the club, But Celtic should have been playing him, because the first time he came on the pitch, you're like that. Wow, look at the pace, look at the left foot on him, and look at the skills he can go by people. And you've got to try and play them in the game.
You're right, Murdo.
He's got to get a game. He's got to get a game.
In European football, the top players at 17, 18, the superstars, they play for the biggest clubs because they're good enough.
Aye.
You're right.
And you just go through every football club now, and it used to be maybe 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds. That was the age of the main team. But the kids are getting a chance. But at Celtic, he should have been getting a chance. And even now, with the poor run Celtic's been on, he should still be thrown in, and on you go. Go and show us what you can do.
Well, Joseph Aiken here makes a point. Now, these big clubs that are interested, we've just mentioned a few, are reportedly interested. And Joseph Aiken is saying, how can these teams see something in Karamoko that we don't? I think that is a danger. Now, people might think, you're talking about a young player. It doesn't really help us just now. But you need to have a bigger picture. You need to look 4 and 5 years down the line. You look at Aidan McGeady, who came through. It was exceptional Champions League. Celtic sold him for £9 million, a product to the youth. Kieran Tierney came through. Did he play at 17? £25 million.
Yeah.
If Celtic's model is to get players in for cheap and sell them for big prices, you're not going to get any cheaper than coming through your academy.
You can have someone that you think is going to be a superstar. I don't know what they've been offered, but just now he's sitting back, knocking back the contract because he knows now, and it'll not be, if he goes abroad, he'll get an awful lot more money than what he'll get at Celtic. But for him personally, he would be sitting back and saying, I should have been playing for Celtic.
Yeah, well,
and especially now.
Yeah. Money is the big factor, isn't it, in football now. Guys, let's jump back now to David Lowe's interview. Says a lot of interesting points. John, what do you make firstly what the Celtic Trust is aiming to do?
It's fascinating. I didn't realise there were, I think he said 10% of the shares have effectively been misplaced. That's a huge amount. And the point he makes is a good one, that even though you have, if that number of shares are effectively redundant, somebody with a minority interest effectively gets a controlling interest. So I think it's very, very valid work that's going on. It is actually very reminiscent of a lot of work that was done in the early 1990s when people were, going around Ireland and getting shares that were lost or could be bought back then. But I think the comparison between then and now doesn't really stand up. Although there is discontent. I mean, the one thing back then that was always going to be the huge lever for change was the financial state of affairs. I mean, sooner or later, Celtic were going to a wall, and all they had to do was bide their time, apply pressure on the bank, and eventually the directors would sell up. The one thing at the moment is Celtic are a very stable financial institution. You can argue about how they're being run in terms of the money they've had, how it's been spent. But, they have, a couple of years ago, for the first time ever, they turned over £100 million for the first year. They do an awful lot right commercially. So I think the points he makes about the stagnation at boardroom level, a lack of fresh blood, a lack of ideas, it becomes unhealthy when people are... there's a reason why businesses rotate people and bring new people in, because people do run out of ideas, and it's important to keep that freshness. And I think that has been quite a significant factor in what's happened this season.
Yeah, and Derek, I mean, he was pretty honest with how he said it was an aspiration, maybe not realistic at the minute, that the end game is to try and own the club. But I mean, more and more clubs are going down this route with fans, either a fan being on the board or club ownership. Is it something you can see happening at Celtic anytime soon?
Personally, no, I don't, Mark. As you say, there are a number of examples. St Mirren and Motherwell immediately spring to mind in the Premiership. And in both cases, certainly there seems to be a degree of stability. I think there's always a financial question mark. I think when there's a supporter-run club, as opposed to a particular backer like Dermot Desmond.
Yeah.
No, I'm not envisaging anytime soon like a supporter run kind of Celtic Football Club, to be honest, Mark.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. We heard there they've got the meeting tonight. I wonder how much of that goes back to the club and how much the club's set up and takes notice of that.
It's times like this that you'll hear more from the voices of the supporters, because most of them are angry just now.
Exactly. You don't
angry,
hear
so
it as much
just
when you're winning league after league.
You know what it's like when, maybe even going back 3-4 months, then they'd all be kind of chatting away, but now they've got their voice. And they're more angry about the whole situation at Celtic Park. Well,
that brings us on nicely, Murdo, to the full situation and what some of the guys have been saying in the media, ex-players and pundits. So let's get what you guys think of some of this. So we'll start with Davy Provan in the Sun. Celtic's immediate future rests with Dermot Desmond. Top coaches cost top dollar, and that's what it will take to get the right man. Someone of the calibre of Brendan Rodgers. In the meantime, they should spare Neil Lennon's dignity by paying him up and removing him from the firing line. Derek, what do you make of what Davy said there?
I think Davy's one of the best columnists around, Mark, and certainly when he's talking about Celtic, I think he talks with authority, and I think Davy sparks opinion all the time. In terms of Neil Lennon, I reported in the aftermath of the defeat to Rangers at Ibrox that Dermot Desmond had told Neil that he was to see the team through the season and he would have the backing to see the team through the season. And nothing that has happened since has made me feel any differently about that, Mark. Clearly, Dermot Desmond... Nothing
since the defeat to Ibrox? Defeat at Ibrox?
I reported...
surely it's got worse since then, is it not?
Well, I'm about to say, I reported in the aftermath of Ibrox that Dermot Desmond had given Neil his backing to see the team through the season. Now, clearly, at that point, Dermot had not foreseen the setbacks twice against Livingston and Hibs. But, I think if there was a time that Dermot was going to pull the trigger, so to speak, it would have been immediately after the Livingston draw during last week. There's been a week, obviously, since then, and building up to the Hamilton game. The fact he hasn't just makes me feel even more that he's probably taking a position that he maybe doesn't see the point of wholesale change now, and he will allow Neil to carry on through to the season. And then I think between now and the end of the season, clearly I think Dermot, the board, have a lot of thinking to do about a forensic review of the whole football setup. That's how I think he's going to do it just now. Or that's my reading of it at the moment, that I think they'll feel that they'd be as well sticking with Neil just now, and in the meantime consider all their options.
Okay, John, Keith Jackson is traced it back to Brendan Rodgers. Keith Jackson in the Daily Record said this week, the problem stemmed back to the departure of Brendan Rodgers almost 2 years ago. The hierarchy didn't bring in transfer targets James Justin and Timothy Castagna, who we all know how well they're doing just now, and John McGinn. He also wanted £5 million investment on an indoor training complex for the academy. Brendan Rodgers was in no rush to bail out on Celtic, but their reluctance to match his ambition left him with little option. John, what do you make of that? Do you see some truth in some of that?
I do agree with that. I would actually go further and to say that some of the problems predate Brendan Rodgers. We go back to 2009, the chance to sign Stephen Fletcher in January, which ultimately, for the sake of a few £100,000, cost Celtic the title. John McGinn is a kind of modern day version of that. He would have, I think we say with some certainty that he'd have walked to Celtic Park, and he's obviously gone now to the Premier League. I think there are long-standing concerns over not just the quality of recruitment, but who has a final say over players. for all, the Victor Wanyama's and Virgil van Dijk's are rightly flagged up, there are far, far more that they get wrong. And that's why there's been this industrial scale waste of resources over a number of years. Celtic £300 million more in turnover than Rangers in the 6 years after Rangers hit the wall, and yet you wouldn't know that now. I think that in terms of Brendan Rodgers, for a couple of years everything was fine, everyone was singing from the same hymn sheet. Then the John McGinn thing quickly followed by Marian Shved. It was only then a matter of where Brendan Rodgers was going to leave Celtic, and obviously that happened within a matter of weeks. So I think the points that Keith makes are perfectly valid, and I think until they are resolved, I think that top managers who'd be interested in trying to take Celtic into Champions League will have their reservations about coming.
Yeah,
I think.
Okay, on you go, Derek.
No, sorry, Mark. I was just going to say, I think it's all too easy just to dismiss Neil Lennon's achievements immediately after Brendan Rodgers. I think at the heart of this season, I think is the recruitment in the summer. And I think, okay, I can understand a long-term argument for decline with Celtic, but I think if the recruitment had been better in the summer, then this season would have been nowhere near as catastrophic as it is.
Yeah, well, here this leads us again nicely into Chris Commons in the Daily Mail. Stephen Gerrard spoke about the club's recruitment policy. Stephen and Ross Wilson, the sporting director, worked together closely looking at 2 transfer windows down the line. That's how a well-run club operates. Gerrard trusts Wilson implicitly. Contrast this to what's going on behind the scenes at Celtic, and it soon becomes clear why the club is in such a mess. Nicky Hammond must carry the can for the poor recruitment in the summer. So, Derek, you're getting on to that point, but we all know Nicky Hammond's took it in the neck here by a whole host of people, including ourselves, and I think he'll hold his hand up, but can he just be the only one to carry the can he?
No, I think ultimately, the manager, you have to believe that at some point or another, the manager has an input in this, to the point where if he doesn't rate the player and doesn't like the player, he doesn't have them there. And if Neil is currently operating on a contract where he doesn't have authority in transfers, then in that degree I have no sympathy for him. I think ultimately a manager's going to be judged by recruitment and by players. And if he's in a situation where he's accepted a set of circumstances where players will come in whether he likes it or not, then, I think in terms of his authority, that's weakened considerably. Now, I think generally a manager will have the final say in a player. And if that player subsequently turns out to be a dud, then clearly there is a question mark over the head of recruitment, but there also has to be a question mark over the manager. And similarly,
Derek,
if a player then becomes tremendous, the manager basks in the praise as well.
Yeah, Derek, as you know, the manager will be asked at some point, would you like to, we're going to sign this player? And he's not really seen the player, so he's not making the decision on them. And I think that's the worst thing in football just now, that someone else is going away, picking your centre-half, that you've told him, I want a centre-half. He's picking the centre-half. You don't get a chance to see him. You're looking after your team every day, so it's someone else's decision to go and spend £3 or £4 million on this. Oh, he's a great centre back, and then when he arrives at your club and you look at him and you think he's no good enough for us.
Well, look,
and I think that's what's happened. A lot of the signings that Celtic have made. Now I don't know if Neil has said yes to them at the end up, but I don't imagine Neil Lennon's been out and looking at someone and saying, this is who we're desperate to get.
Yeah, well, guys, it's Paul McKenzie just makes a point here. We're chatting about, Derek, you were saying that Dermot promised Neil Lennon at the end of the season and then a full kind of review then, or a full changeover then, but it's okay sitting with Neil to the end of the season. The board must remember they have 60,000 season tickets to sell. That's a big question, is it not? I mean, season ticket renewal letters, am I right in saying that they go out round about March, April time? Is that going to be a problem?
It could be. Yeah, I mean, it could be the case that the board are forced to issue a statement and making the situation far clearer than it is at the moment. The cynic in you will say that will probably happen because they will be deeply concerned about the season ticket situation. So such a statement could well appease the many unhappy fans. But I think they've had so many opportunities that if they'd wanted to sack Neil, they would have done it by now.
Yeah.
So it just makes me feel even more sure that, barring, an absolute catastrophic set of results on the park, I still think that at the moment, I still think they're going to stick with Neil through to the end of the season, and in the meantime, review their options throughout.
Derek, would you not be looking for, if you're going to change the manager, if it's going to happen at the end of the season, what chance has a new manager got to look at the players he's got already?
It's a good argument, Murdo. I think when Brendan Rodgers left Celtic, I think he was particularly anxious to go to Leicester at that time because it gave him the final few months of the season to assess the Leicester squad.
To look at them,
To then also decide what he needed to do in the transfer market in the summer. It's a good argument.
It's worked.
Yeah. Guys, that's us. Thanks very much for joining us. Again, John McGarry, Derek McGregor. Hopefully speak to you next week. Some good points there. You know, it's always good to get these guys insight and things. These are guys in the know. And Murdo, that's us. But listen, a different feel to the show this afternoon. Usually we're reacting on a game, but it's been a quiet week, which is a good thing, you would say, in the current situation. A quiet week. Back to playing tomorrow. Prediction for tomorrow night against Hamilton.
Every game's a tough one just now. We said at the tail end last year that Celtic had to go on a run at some point, and when we weren't winning any games, I said it just takes the first game and he's won a game. Then it's the next game, and we managed to get 6, and then it was a way downhill since then. And
needs to be tomorrow night.
Needs to start again tomorrow night.
They need to get back to winning ways tomorrow night. So keep our fingers crossed. Another big week as of now till another month. I think it goes Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. So the games are thick and fast. Important period for the club. And thanks very much to everybody. David Lowe, Celtic Trust. And for everybody for watching. Thanks to our sponsors, First Star Legends Gin, Social Recluse, and First Class Transfers. We'll be back again next week.